guys, it's Amy, and I'm here flipping a piece of furniture that I've been painting, and it just got me thinking about a lot of different painting tips and tricks and hacks that I've learned over the years, and I thought I should just turn on the video and make a video about that, just to give you a few pointers of things that will help you if you're going to paint furniture to flip or if you're just going to paint it to use in your house. These are some things to think about while you're picking that piece of furniture to find out kind of how well it's going to translate into a painted piece, how hard it's going to be for you to paint it, or how easy it will be, and what kind of paint you should use, how you should seal it, just some different kinds of tips and tricks for that. Real quick before I dive in, I just want to say please subscribe to my channel if you're interested in furniture flipping or furniture painting or mural painting. That's another thing I talk about sometimes because I made a living for a long time painting murals. So any of those things are of interest to you, please subscribe and check out my channel. I'm also offering a free worksheet on furniture flipping that helps you calculate pricing of like what to charge for the things that you want to flip. So if you check in the description box, you can find a link to that furniture flip worksheet. All right, here we go. Well, right off the bat, one of the first tips I want to give you is before you even buy a piece to paint or decide to paint a piece that you already have or that someone else is willing to give you, look at it and analyze how easy it's going to be to paint. Is it paintable? There's a few questions you should ask yourself. I know there's this piece of furniture in my house that belonged to my husband before we were married, and I just want to paint it so bad because it's gotten a little torn up and it has this part with these little zebras on it that I hate. I think it'd be so cute painted, but it has these really deep pockets that would be very hard to paint inside. So I have somehow withheld myself from painting it, even though I like to paint everything. So think about whether you can get a paintbrush into some of the places, how hard it's going to be. Think about the surface and how shiny it is, how slick it is. Think about what it's made out of. I'll tell you right now, if a piece is made of laminate, like fake wood, just printed plastic made to look like wood, it is generally not a good idea to paint it. It's usually not worth it. The paint doesn't want to stick to that. It's already a cheap piece of furniture. It just doesn't do very well with painting. Look for a piece that's made of real wood. That'll be easier for you to paint. And look at what the surface is like and figure out what you're going to use to either rough up the surface that it already has or sand it off or do something to prime it so that the paint will stick to that surface. The factory finishes are super shiny and they can be very hard to get paint to stick to. There are different types of paints that are designed to stick better onto shiny surfaces, and it's better to use one of those if you have something that's a little bit hard to paint. One example of what I'm talking about is this piece right here. It's hard to see, but it has a deep, deep crevice right here in it that I realized would be hard to get a paintbrush down into. But if you're changing the color of it significantly, people will be able to see the places that you didn't paint. In this case, what I recommend doing is something like this, and I could do this in the piece I was talking about that my husband had that has the deep little corners, is before you even start painting it, find a can of spray paint. This is what I did. A can of spray paint that's in a similar color to what you're using. It doesn't have to be the exact same, because usually this is going to be way down in the cracks. There will be shadows. It's not going to be real easy to view, but it will make a difference whether it's painted or not. So what I did first was I sprayed into all these little cracks so that they would be painted and I wouldn't have some brighter wood kind of shining out from those spots. Another hack I'll tell you guys is Q-tips are really great as a painting tool. They're good for cleaning. I use just regular Q-tips for this, but when I used to have a bunch of artists who worked for me and we did production painting, I would buy a lot of times those Q-tips that are made to put on makeup with. So some of them have a pointy end and some of them have a wider end. We use those all the time for touching things up or for getting little dust or hairs or weird stuff out of the paint that was stuck in there. Those little pointy Q-tips are really good for detail work. So inexpensive tools like that can help you a lot when you're painting. So I spray painted this, and that way it was dark on the inside, and then when I went back with my paint, I didn't have that extra old color shining through. This especially is important if you're painting something white when it was a dark piece of furniture. You got to think about anything that you can't get to with the paint is going to show it'll really show through when you have white on everything. An example of that in this piece is the inside of this table shows from the outside, the inside of the legs and the inside under part. And this part doesn't really need to be totally finished out, but you can see it. And so if I had painted this table white instead of black, you would notice when you look at it, you'd see these inside legs really dark brown if I didn't paint them white. So I would probably need to paint the whole inside white too so that I wouldn't have this very strange inside part showing every time you looked at it. So what I recommend when you start thinking about what you're going to paint with is figure out whether you want to use spray paint, if it's something that's a little hard to get to, or if it's something that has a fairly shiny finish, spray paint can be a good choice. I'm not real fond of using spray paint myself, and this would have been a candidate. I could have used spray paint for the whole thing, but instead I just used it inside the crevices, and then I hit it with a paintbrush because I'm a painter who likes to use a paintbrush. That's what I'm comfortable with. But if you are not an experienced painter, spray paint can be more forgiving, and that might be a better way to start off. Just make sure if you're using spray paint that you have a space outdoors, that you're masking off the ground or anything that you don't want to get paint all over. And wear some kind of a mask if you're around it a lot. Make sure that you are in an open area and try to do it on a day that's not super windy, because it can be hard to spray. If the wind's blowing in one way, you'll have one side of your thing that looks perfect and the other side that the paint's just not going on right because the wind is kind of blowing it off every time. So if you aren't super comfortable with a paintbrush, spray paint may be a great way to start with painting furniture to flip. Another note about spray painting: if you're going to spray paint in the winter like we are right now, I'm down in Texas, it's not super cold here, but the day that I was spray painting was a particularly cold day. Just remember to bring your can of spray paint back inside with you while your piece is drying outside, because you need to keep that warm enough. It will perform better if it doesn't get super cold. So bring the can back inside with you until you're ready to paint another coat. And multiple light coats is always better than some really heavy coat. That's when you start to get drips or weird shiny spots. Do multiple coats that are light. You're going to be better off that way. Now, an option that I talk about quite a bit is chalk paint, and that's what I used here. Even though I wasn't doing like a farmhouse style aged finish, I went ahead and used chalk paint because it is designed to stick really well to previous surfaces, and this one did have a kind of a shiny surface on it. What I did to make sure that it was going to stick really well was I did a scuff sanding on top of it. So I just sanded it enough to get some of that first clear coat off. And if it's getting all powdery on top, then that means you're getting through that first level of clear coat and you're scuffing it up. What you need to do is do that all over and then wipe it down with something. I used a tack cloth, which is a sticky kind of gauze fabric that picks up all the dirt and dust, and get that dust off. And then it'll be much easier for the paint to stick when you do a coat of it. Because when you sell furniture, you don't want it to get scratched up just when they're like trying to move it into their car and they'll be like, oh, I don't think I want to buy this after all. Okay, you want to make sure that you're selling them something that's going to be sturdy, it's going to look nice, and so you want to make sure that the paint sticks really well and then that it's sealed in some way when you're finished painting it, to make sure that it stays on and that it's a good sturdy piece, that you're selling somebody something decent. What I used for this one was some chalk paint. This is an inexpensive brand that I got at Walmart called Waverly. I've used the expensive stuff called Annie Sloan. I've used that before. For black, they don't have a true black in Annie Sloan. The color they have is called graphite, and it's a very dark gray. So this one, I wanted this piece to be really black, and this is called ink, and it is one of the truest blacks that I've been able to find in chalk paint. Because chalk paint has chalk added, like a powdery chalk, kind of like you can make your own using grout or plaster or calcium carbonate, which is a white chalky powder. And so a lot of times they're not completely dark or completely black, but this one is a pretty good dark one. And I wanted to go dark with this, so this is the brand I used. I also recommend that you have, if you're using like a small bottle of any kind of paint like this, you don't want to be dipping your brush down into this, and also it will dry out some if you leave the lid off, so it's good to pour it into a container like either a paper bowl or paper plate like this. In between coats of painting, it's a good idea to just, I wrap my brush with a damp paper towel and then I put it into a plastic baggie. You can just put it in a plastic baggie, but if you're going to leave it for any length of time, put something damp in there to keep it damp. And another thing you need for chalk painting is a spray bottle with just some water in it. It really helps because chalk paint's super thick and heavy. It has a lot of drag, and so if you either spray onto the piece itself or spray at least the top of the chalk paint before you start painting, sometimes I spray my brush before I start painting, that will help it flow a lot smoother. And it's a real thick paint, so it's okay for it to be thinned down a little bit like that. Another thing I like to do, if you paint very often, if you paint very many things and you are having the luxury of having more than one paintbrush to use, I save one paintbrush for darker paints and then one paintbrush for lighter paints. It just kind of helps you. They get stained over time, and you get most of the paint out, but sometimes if you're painting something white and you just painted something black, even though you rinsed and rinsed and rinsed the brush, sometimes you'll get a little bit of like black colored water kind of dripping out in there, and you don't want that to happen when you're painting something light. So if you're able to do that, if you have the luxury of having a couple different brushes, and they don't have to be real expensive brushes, but one for dark colors, one for light colors, and then I keep a separate one usually for my clear coat or for my waxes, so that it's not getting mixed up again with the colors. When I'm ready to clear coat, I don't want a lot of color mixing into that. I'm ready to just seal it and keep it clear. When you are painting a piece, whether you're spray painting or painting with a brush, a really good idea is to paint it from different angles. So lay it on its side or on its back and paint parts of it that way that are easiest to get to, and then stand it up and paint parts that way. The other thing that's good about that is it keeps you from missing a spot, because you know, there's so many different angles on every piece, and the more different angles you have it turned in when you're painting it, the more likely you are to make sure that you get a really good solid coat on every surface that needs to be painted. And so make sure that you're looking at it from every angle and you're not missing a section. You don't want to find out when someone's coming to pick something up and they pick it up to put in the truck that you like missed one back leg or something, because at that point that's not when you want to make that discovery. Okay. Now when it comes to sealing a piece, you do need to seal a piece. You can seal it, there's a lot of different choices. If you want to do something that's not going to be too shiny, that's going to be pretty easy to do, you can use wax. There are a lot of different waxes that go with the different brands of chalk paint. You can even use like old school furniture wax. It doesn't necessarily have to be a chalk painted brand, but something that will seal it, and when it dries it gets a harder surface and it helps to protect your piece of furniture, so you want to do that. Now if it's a piece that is going to have a lot of traffic, like a tabletop or the top of a dresser or something, then those I do like to clear coat with something more like a polyurethane, a protective finish. These are going to be more liquid, and you paint that on with a paintbrush. This one is my favorite, Minwax Polyacrylic, and I get it at Home Depot. You can get it a lot of places, but there are different brands. I like to use a water-based one because a lot of times I'm painting inside and I want to make sure it's something that is safe, and I don't want to have to mess with the oil. I want to be able to wash out my brushes with water and just take care of them and be done with it. If you are using an acrylic, a clear coat like this, you need to stir it, don't shake it. This is a tip you need to make sure and remember. I know a lot of times people shake their paint because they shake the paint at the hardware store or whatever, but when it's clear coat, you should stir it, open it up and stir it, don't shake it, because when you shake it, it gets bubbles in it, and those bubbles will make it dry with a bunch of weird uneven spots, because the bubbles will pop and it won't be flat and clear. So stir it, don't shake it. When you're choosing what you need to paint to seal, you need to definitely seal the top and the outside. Now it's up to you if you want to seal, like in a table like this, like I was saying, you can see the inside of each leg because you can look through this glass top that's going to be here, and you can see even this part where the screws are and stuff. You can see that. I chose to paint that black because I thought it would look neater all over, but I didn't choose to clear coat that inside part. That part is optional, but you do need to seal and clear coat or wax the whole outside, anything that's going to be outside and going to have wear and tear to it. So that's up to you. When you're doing a clear coat and you want something that's got a little bit of a sheen, you can get flat finishes. This is a satin finish, so it just has a little bit of sheen, and you can get a high gloss, but remember, the higher gloss that it is, the more you're going to see every little imperfection, because the shinier it is, it shows up every little dent or divot or hair or anything that's in it. So I feel like something like on the matte or satin side is your best bet. In this case, I wanted to make this look kind of modern. This is like a 70s mod piece, and so I didn't go with a totally flat finish. I wanted it to be a little bit shiny, so this is the satin finish that I'm using. But even if you're using a finish that is going to dry flat, when you're painting it, you want to make sure you don't miss any surfaces. And so it's a good idea to get, when you're doing at least the last coat, make sure that the piece of furniture is between you and a light source so that you can see the light reflecting. You'll be able to tell easily if there's any spots you missed. So that's important, to make sure you don't miss anything with that clear coat. If you have light on the other side of where you and the piece are, and make sure that you can see if it's reflecting the light, then you know that you got it everywhere. It's also a great idea when you're doing clear coat and you go around an edge, just run your finger under that edge like this when you're done, to make sure that there's not like a big gob down there that's going to drip or dry into a big clump. So after you paint past it, just a quick run of your finger down to make sure that you don't have like a whole bunch of extra paint down there that's going to be a bad surprise when you find it later. When you're on your final coat of clear coat, do a really light feather touch and make sure that you're going with the grain, and then do very smooth, light, long strokes to get a very smooth finish. That's what you want to do on the final clear coat, so that you're not seeing too many brush marks, okay? It'll look better if you, at the end, after you've painted whatever, while it's still wet, you very lightly drag all the way across so there aren't a lot of stops and starts in each brush stroke. That's the best way to get a nice, smooth finish. One more tip I'll give you is when you do your final coat, or your final last little bit of touching up, do it in daylight. Now, a lot of us are doing these flips like nights and weekends because it's a side hustle, so you may be painting stuff at night after you get home from your regular job. I do that a lot too, but before you sell it, take it in daylight. Before you sell it, make sure that you look at every little bit of it and make sure that you didn't miss something or have drips or have weird surprises or things that you couldn't tell when you were painting it under, just lamplight or, your light fixture. When you're in the sunlight, you're going to see so much more. It's very harsh and unforgiving, and the truth is that when you sell it to a customer, they're going to come probably and they're going to take it outside to look at it and to load it into their car, so they're going to see every weird thing that happens. And I used to have a furniture store that did a lot of custom painted children's furniture, and more times than I care to admit, I would discover something like as we were helping the customer load it up because I had painted it in my shop or whatever. And in the bright daylight, you just could see every tiny imperfection. So you want to be the one to discover those. You don't want the buyer to discover them. So it's really better, even if it's just moving it outside a little bit before they get there. You might find, this has happened to me, I found one or two little things that I needed to touch up that were easy to touch up, but that way they weren't imperfections. By the time the buyer got there, they looked perfect. So look at it in the sunlight. Make sure that you do the last check before somebody gets there who's going to be going over it with the scrutiny, deciding if they want to buy it or not. That way you avoid any bad surprises. All right, I'm finishing up this piece, and I decided to paint it black and kind of mod. It's 70s mod. I hear people using the term mid-century modern to describe a whole lot of stuff right now because it's a buzzword and it's really big, and a lot of people doing this stuff are really young. But if it's something from the 70s or 80s, it's back in style and it's cool to flip it, but it's not really mid-century modern. That's really stuff from the 50s and 60s. And so this is more what I would call like 70s mod, and so I am going to try and style it up to look kind of groovy and cool, and I'm going to list it if I can get some great pictures, see what I can get for it. I bought this thing for about 12 bucks, I think. It had been 30 bucks originally, and I definitely had my eye on it. And then when I saw it, no, it was 75% off. I'll look up how much it was. I think it was $7 and something. So when I saw it marked down 75%, I was like, now's the time to get this thing and bring it home. So we'll see what I can get for it. I'll try and leave in the comments what I sold it for in the end, but I'm going to try and list it pretty soon. Another just hint I will give you, a tip or a thing that is good for you to know if you are thinking about flipping furniture, is that generally the prices that they charge at the basic thrift stores, the big ones like Salvation Army, Habitat for Humanity, and Goodwill, those are good prices if you want to take it home and use it yourself, but they're not great prices if you want to flip it, because you need to be able to make a better profit than that, especially if you're going to paint it and put some work into it. So generally speaking, you need to look for things once they go on sale. 50% or more is when you're going to be looking at a good profit on those things. Even if they go 25% off, sometimes I'll buy things that are a pretty good price and see what I can make on it. But generally the price they list it at is not going to be quite low enough for you to make good money on them in general. You get the kind of prices you're looking for, you'll get better at garage sales or at a place that regularly does mark down. I got this one at Habitat for Humanity. They have a coding system where after a certain time it goes down 25%, then 50%, then 75%. So you can look at everything and know that it's been marked down 75%, and that's when, or 50%, that's when you're ready to buy it. You know that you can make a better profit on it. Also, sometimes on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, you can find things that'll be cheap enough that you can flip it and make quite a bit more on it if you're going to add value by painting or doing something good to it and taking a great picture. So Okay, I hope those tips were helpful. And I'm going to leave a link to my furniture flip worksheet down below. And if you click on that, you can get a worksheet that helps you kind of calculate pricing for things that you want to flip. It sometimes is helpful in the beginning to decide how much you're willing to pay for something by calculating and kind of retroactively figuring out, okay, this is what I can pay for this and still make the profit that I want. So click on that link below, download that worksheet, and good luck flipping. Let me know what you flipped in the comments. I'd love to hear all about it.